Hello there, my name is Susan O'Connor. I'm the Director of the Scottish Civic Trust, and we're joined today by Ronnie MacRae from the Community Housing Trust to talk about the Achtercairn Regeneration project, which is one of the shortlisted projects for the 2022 My Place Awards. Thanks very much for joining us, Ronnie. Can you give us a little bit of a history of the project just to start us off?
Yeah, well, it's been a long project. It started based around a brownfield site, which was ruins of a hotel which had burnt down. It lay dormant for many years, and it was sort of blighting the community, if you like. So obviously, in the West Coast, population decline and economic decline was an issue at the time. So the community wanted to regenerate the community and rebuild, which was a prominent site. I don't know if you know Gairloch, but the site itself is on the main road through Gairloch, but the previous main body of Gairloch, if you like, was off the road, and there's a potential that people drive by. So yeah, so it was a regeneration project. It was a multi-use, multi-partner and multi-tenure project, as it's turned out, and it's worked really well.
So I suppose the need it was addressing, what would you say that was then, locally?
Well, from our perspective, we're often described as a housing body, but we prefer to be described as a community body, and I think it was really a holistic community project. So it's the economy, it's affordable housing, it's the social side of things. You know, there's the air training core, which we managed to get the MOD to build, and that's a specific youth facility. There's a community-owned passive house building that now employs, I think, over 10 full-time, and it also sells produce from, I think, around about 50 local producers. So it's creating a really strong circular economy. There's, I think, 5 or 6 different affordable housing tenures on the site. And there's an economic shop, which is just a purely commercial shop, but it was a key, seen as a key facility in the village, because it was like a hardware shop, but it also provided an opportunity for veterinary services during the week. So quite a wide ranging range of impacts there.
Yeah, I would say so too. And I think probably because of the site, probably an element of civic pride there as well, to see such a prominent site reused properly as well.
Absolutely. You know, it's a prominent site now. It's delivered an awful lot. And because it was a community-led project, and it had all the bodies and interested parties in the village inputting into it, the project itself has developed out the land that was acquired. There was 3 different parcels of land acquired and made into one holistic site, but it's also opened up two neighbouring sites. So it was a long-term vision, and that's continuing, you know.
Yeah. And how did you source the funding for the initial part of the project, and how did you kick it off?
Well, initially, there's a good number of stakeholders, and they were all included in the working group, which was driven by the local community. We chaired that on behalf of the local community, but the organisations like Highlands Enterprise, Highland Council, they all contributed because they could see the longer vision and the benefit it was going to take to the community.
And what would you say was the biggest obstacle that you encountered in the process that you can talk about publicly?
Well, I mean, you know, the biggest benefit was the very large community steering group, the Achtercairn Development Group, but that was probably the biggest challenge as well. You know, when you've got so many interested and passionate local organisations and individuals wanting the best for their community, managing that can be challenging. It worked really well in Gairloch, not without a few hiccups and difficult conversations through the way, but the majority prevailed, and it's a great project at the end of it.
How did you prioritize those discussions? So you're talking about having lots of disparate influences on a project, and everybody, of course, wants their own part of it to be delivered early on. Did you work out a schedule of delivery, or how did you manage that to be equitable and to sort of make sure that nobody was left behind?
Well, it was quite a democratic process. I mean, the meetings were big. They were inclusive. We held them in the hall, and most of the interested parties attended most meetings. Obviously, not everyone could attend every meeting, but so they were quite democratic, and there was lively debate about the priorities. But I think the size of the group was a challenge, but in other respects it was a benefit, because there was clear majorities.
And also, I suppose it means that you're getting so many people engaged with the project that when it comes to actually putting in your funding submissions, you can really prove the community need that much more.
Absolutely, and even for discussions with the likes of the MOD, I mean, it was great to be able to get them in as a partner on the project, and deliver such a huge benefit to the community, that and it didn't come out of the, well, it did come out of the public purse, but not necessarily out of what would be seen as a normal community benefit fund at the time, so yeah.
Yeah, it's quite unusual for a community project to be able to involve the MOD, I would say, in their development process. So well done on that.
Indeed,
apart from the large scale public meetings that you talked about, was there any other sort of community involvement? And by which I'm meaning, did they do any site works, for example? Did you do events? How did you draw in people who weren't the usual suspects into your project?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Gale Centre, that's Gairloch and Lochiew Action Forum. They actually own one of the buildings. It's a passive house building, so they've got a lot of community buy-in themselves, and they've got a lot of volunteers. It was predominantly volunteers at that time. When it started off, they're now able to employ folks locally. And they've got long-term employment as a social enterprise. So there was a lot of buy-in from that perspective. A lot of the local folks were able to assist, in discussions with things like the landowners and all that sides of things. So yeah, there was a lot of active community involvement.
I think people often underestimate the complexity of negotiating with land ownership issues, I think, in particular. So it's great to have local people who have maybe a bit more persuasive power than somebody else coming in fresh off the boat, so to speak, would have. It's great to be able to mobilize that and to use it for the project.
Indeed, yeah, no, it was great, and I think it gave some of the landowners comfort that, with an element of community control there, their community spirit and offer to sell wasn't going to be benefited on the open market. So it was always going to stay within community control, and all the land now does stay within community control.
They must be delighted by that as a result. So what's next for the project then? I know you're kind of, it's mushrooming, isn't it? There's lots and lots of things. What's next the next 5 years, shall we say? Put it like that.
For Gairloch specifically itself, or for spin-offs from this project?
Well, I suppose Gairloch more generally, I guess, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, part of this development has used up all the land that we bought initially. We were the vehicle that was used to buy a whole parcel, and then the Achtercairn development group decided how it was divvied up after that for the different uses. But part of that was a longer term vision, so it's opened up 2 potential sites off that, and access was left through this site to them. So we're working on how we do that. Quite encouraged that the confidence the community have gained from this project, that
Mm.
the local community trust, the Gale company, are now interested in actually owning houses themselves. So that's a real confidence booster for the community. We're doing that in a lot of other communities where communities own housing now, and we're building the housing for them, and they take ownership, and you know, that they've got control over that houses. But spinning off more widely from the Gairloch development, it's given other communities confidence to, you know, we've built a school in Strontian, for example, which is community owned, rented back to the education department. We've got a health centre in Staffin on Skye that the community own and rent back to NHS. A shinty pitch has been built. Lots of different things that communities own. And a lot of that stems from the confidence that people see in the projects like Gairloch.
It's amazing, really, to think of what can be achieved by a little bit of community confidence and propping up and a bit of support in the right places at the right time, isn't it?
That to me is one of the biggest. I mean, it's fantastic to see the houses and the Gale Centre and the shop and the MOD, but for me, the biggest thing about Gairloch is the confidence it's given. Not just Gairloch, but so many other communities.
Yeah. There's nothing like, I think, a physical presence or a visible development to make people think that they can do it themselves, which is really fantastic.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of communities been to see Gairloch now. and, you know, there's nothing quite like it. It's when communities speak to each other, and that's it's quite an empowering thing, you know. And you know, I'm firmly of the view that Gairloch has influenced a lot of positive policy in Scottish government on the community-led side, and you know, community enabling, community wealth building, all that sides of things.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Ronnie. That's really, really helpful to hear, and I'm sure everybody's really enjoyed hearing just what you've been getting up to and how many mushrooming effects it's been having in the local area. That's fantastic.
Thanks for your time, Susan.